episode of Paradigm Profiles is about the Romper Room gang. The Bay Area suffered a major setback on April 24, 2012 when it was infiltrated by the FBI, the DEA, the Vallejo Police Department, and other local law enforcement agencies. According to court documents, agents arrested a total of 25 individuals in Vallejo, Stockton, Fairfield, Oakland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, and Oklahoma City. Some of those arrested are Vallejo-based rappers and associates of an entertainment label known as Thiz Entertainment. The basis of the indictment surrounded a major federal investigation into drug trafficking throughout the country. During the investigation, agents seized approximately 45,000 MDMA pills, also known as ecstasy, approximately 4 pounds of crack cocaine, a half pound of heroin, and $200,000 in suspected drug proceeds. Agents also forfeited 230 acres of property valued at approximately $1 million as part of the investigation. As part of the takedown, agents executed 3 federal search warrants and seized approximately 5 pounds of marijuana, a loaded firearm, a 2010 Audi A6 worth an estimated value of $60,000, and an Audi A5 worth an estimated value of $50,000. Agents seized $67,238 in Vallejo and $6,831 in Sacramento for a total of $74,069 during the service of the federal search warrants. According to the criminal complaint, the DEA-led investigation uncovered a network of drug distributors working in the Crest neighborhood of Vallejo, along with individuals transporting large quantities of drugs outside of California to realize a larger profit. A number of the subjects of the investigation performed as rappers under the entertainment label known as Thiz Entertainment. The origins of Thiz Entertainment can be traced back to the notorious Vallejo-based robbery crews known as the Romper Room gang. The primary activities of the Romper Room gang included armed bank robberies, drug trafficking, and murder. The Romper Room gang was active throughout the late 1980s and 1990s. However, as a result of Vallejo police investigations and the assistance from federal law enforcement, many Romper Room gang members were convicted of federal crimes and incarcerated for several years in the state and federal prison systems. Some of the individuals charged in the criminal complaint are alleged to be former members of the Romper Room gang. According to the complaint, Thiz Entertainment started in 1999 as a record label promoting and producing rap artists from the San Francisco Bay Area, primarily from the Crest neighborhood of their hometown of Vallejo. The name Thiz Entertainment originates from the term Thiz, which is slang for the drug MDMA, also known as ecstasy. In many songs by artists on the Thiz Entertainment label, the lyrics glorify and promote the use and distribution of MDMA pills. The complaint alleged that the targets of this investigation engaged in large-scale drug trafficking, while also releasing rap albums under the Thiz Entertainment label. During the conspiracy, agents uncovered trafficking of MDMA, cocaine base, heroin, oxycodone, and marijuana in violation of federal law. The complaint details drug shipments sent from the Vallejo area to Oklahoma City, Jamaica, Queens, New York, Atlanta, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The following individuals were charged with multiple counts of drug trafficking in 2 federal criminal complaints. Michael Lott performs under the name Miami the Most. Major Norton performs under the name Doobie. Lawrence Kennedy Nelson. Gaylord Franklin performs under the name Jeezy. Clifford Bullock. Narco McFarlane Sr. LaTroy Cunningham. Eric Robinson, Dante Barbarin, Eileen Knight, Bathsheba Cook. Bruce Thurman performs under the name Little Bruce. Damian Peterson, Mikael Brown, Nicholas Ramirez, Ung Duong, Fat and Win, Marcus Davis, Tiffany Brown, Andre Cawthorn, Michael Smiley, Anthony Young, and Anthony Payton. This case was the product of an extensive investigation by the DEA Sacramento District Office, the Vallejo Police Department, the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department, and the Sacramento FBI Safe Streets Task Force. Assistant United States Attorney Jason Hitt prosecuted the case. Years later, Hit would also be the prosecuting assistant United States attorney for Operation Valley Star. This case was part of an organized crime drug enforcement task force, OCD ETF. The OCD ETF program was established in 1982 to conduct comprehensive multi-level attacks on major drug trafficking and money laundering organizations and those primarily responsible for the nation's drug supply. When prosecuted in federal court, drug traffickers typically receive much harsher sentences. In addition to longer sentences imposed, unlike state court where prisoners are released early on parole, there is no early release on parole in the federal system. On its face, the case appears like any other federal drug sting. It was built over 4 years and began when a man named Michael Lott pulled a silver Mercedes-Benz into the parking lot of the Hidden Brook Golf Club in Vallejo, a struggling city about 30 miles from San Francisco, and allegedly tried to sell heroin to an undercover agent. At the time of his arrest, Lott was the self-proclaimed CEO of Thiz Entertainment, the rap label started by Andre Hicks, the late rapper and mogul widely known as Mac Dre. The label once promised to put the Bay Area hip-hop scene on the map, bringing with it a tight-knit group of rappers from the Crest, a working-class neighborhood in Vallejo notorious for drugs and gang violence. Mac Dre's crew helped popularize the Bay Area brand of party-centric hip-hop music called hyphy, launching rappers to major record stores and MTV. But Mac Dre was killed, his violent death left unsolved. The death of Mac Dre devastated the Bay Area. He was their legend, and the hyphy movement would never fully recover after the loss of someone like Mac Dre. We still had Tupac, another Bay Area legend, but Tupac didn't represent the hyphy movement, and he too would also be taken away from us years later. Ghost riding the whip and sipping on the scissor would slowly fizzle out and die out with Mac Dre's memory. These were some of the traditions that made the hyphy movement what it was. Despite the fact that many people believed that Mac Dre was the architect and pioneer of the hyphy movement, he wasn't. He was just the one who popularized it and universalized it through his music. Fellow Oakland rapper Keek the Sneak was actually the one credited with creating and starting the movement. He coined the term hyphy in the early 90s on one of his recordings, but the movement wouldn't hit full stride until the early 2000s. The hyphy culture emerged in Oakland before rising to prominence through the wider Bay Area in the early 2000s. It is distinguished by gritty pounding rhythms and has been compared to crunk music. An individual is said to get hyphy when they dance in an overstated, fast-paced, ridiculous manner, or if they get over loud with other people. The phrase to get hyphy is similar to the southern phrase to get crunk. Those who consider themselves part of the hyphy movement strive for this behavior. Throughout the Bay Area, particularly in East Oakland, there are events hosted called sideshows where people perform or watch illegal automobile performances. These performances include activities such as donuts, ghost riding, an action that has been proven fatal on multiple occasions, and street racing, while others dance and go dumb around them. The hyphy movement's resurgence in early 2006 was cited by prominent Bay Area rapper E40 as a new opportunity for the Bay Area's unique sound to reach a nationwide audience. For many Bay Area natives, rapper Mac Dre is cited as the individual who spearheaded the general audience's interest in hyphy music after his sudden death in 2004. Mac Dre's Trill TV DVD special represented everything hyphy, from what goes on at the sideshows to the street slang and common dances like going dumb and the thizzle dance became popular moves created by Mac Dre. Many artists such as Drake and DJ Mustard pay homage to Mac Dre due to his huge influence in their musical careers. With the start of Mac Dre's label, Thiz Entertainment, he was able to shine a light on local talents such as E40 and Andre Nicotina, prominent members of the Bay Area rap scene. For Police, the record label's dramatic decline was predicted by listening to music. Over 2 decades, Mac Dre and his rapping associates virtually taunted law enforcement. Amid the rising popularity of gangster rap, prosecutors increasingly mined its lyrics for evidence in criminal matters. In 1990, prosecutors tried 3 members of a 2 Live crew on obscenity charges after a lurid performance at a Florida nightclub. Prosecutors used Snoop Dogg's "Murder Was the Case" during the rapper's 1996 murder trial. The rappers were acquitted in both cases. In 1992, some of Mac Dre's songs released through his own Romper Room Records label implicated him in a series of robberies associated with the Crest Romper Room gang. Although Mac Dre's friends claim the rapper was never an active participant in the crimes, he and two others were arrested and sent to federal prison. Mac Dre served 5 years. Upon his release, Mac Dre quit rapping about robberies and moved on to partying. He dubbed his new entertainment company Thiz, a slang word for ecstasy. The new in-your-face branding caught on quickly and gave police a reason to keep following Mac Dre's career. It was only a matter of time, they surmised, before they catch the Thiz crew with the real thing. They were all rap artists first. They had some pretty big names on that label, said Sacramento County Sheriff Detective Brad Rose, who helped crack the case. Or should I say, who helped frame Mac Dre and his crew. But those drugs are highly profitable. Federal authorities would highlight the Thiz Entertainment connections when they announced their big takedown in April 2012. But in the end, hundreds of pages of court records revealed that most of the people arrested in the operation had no connection to the label. A few were Thiz rappers and friends from the Crest. Michael Lott was not, in fact, CEO of the company, Mac Dre's mother said. As a businessman and a drug dealer, he was pretty much a failure. During the heyday of funk in the 1970s, international stars like Confunction and Sly Stone had connections to Vallejo and his Crest neighborhood. We've always had a neighborhood where we get on with each other. We come from a city that has nothing, said Jamal Rocker, a Vallejo-born rapper known as Mac Mall and a contemporary of Mac Dre's. Like when you hear the word Cuddy, it means cousin and friend. Even cutthroat, that's a term of endearment. Both Macs, Mac Dre and Mac Mall, are named in honor of one of the area's first musical successes, Michael the Mac Robinson, a rapper with a pimp persona who was shot and killed in Vallejo in 1991. According to Rocker, the Mac provided the mold for many kids from the Crest. It all started with the Mac, and finally remembers once getting a ride in the Mac's white Cadillac, where there was so much bass I could barely breathe. It was within that small world in the mid-90s that a group of around a dozen kids who grew up together became known as the Romper Room Crew, first for their general neighborhood mischief, and the later as a criminal enterprise. The core group consisted of Jamal Diggs, Jay Diggs, Simon Curtis Nelson, Kilo Kurt, Andre Cawthorn, Dre from the Bay, Troy Reddick, Coolio the Underdog, and Mac Dre. Mac Dre's gregarious and outgoing persona had been known as a rising star from a young age, making waves with the cassette tape featuring a standout single, Too Hard for the Fucking Radio, in 1989 as a student at Hogan High School. His flow was fast and confident, and he built upon the bouncy bass that had its roots in the funk era. But by that time, some of Mac Dre's friends and collaborators had begun robbing banks. Vallejo police began focusing on the Crest with newfound intensity, and as they struggled to solve the crimes, Mac Dre rapped about it. In one song, Mac Dre described a heroin credit union robbery. In another song, which he dedicated to Vallejo police detective Dave McGraw, Mac Dre taunted the department. Punk police, what a one-track mind. Man, you can't even find who's been robbing you blind. In 1992, Mac Dre already had several arrests under his belt for assault and weapons possession when the department and federal authorities decided to follow him, a wire confidential informant and two fellow rappers, Diggs and Kilo Kurt, to Fresno, where Mac Dre recently had performed with Ice Cube. For 2 days, more than 35 officers and FBI agents trailed the friends as they picked up girls, shopped for sneakers, and purchased deodorant at Walmart. On the first day, surveillance agents said the group cased the downtown Bank of America by driving in circles around the block. The friends parked an extra car nearby. Agents suspected they would use it later for their getaway. After a late night of playing dice with several women in their motel rooms, Mac Dre stayed behind as Diggs and Kilo Kurt returned to the bank, according to the surveillance notes. But authorities had not been careful. A television news crew monitoring police radio traffic had heard officers as they prepared to disrupt the heist. As surveillance agents watched Diggs and Kilo Kurt park the car and take out masks, a news van arrived. Spooked by the cameras, the two sped back to the motel for Mac Dre and headed home. Police pulled them over 2 hours later on a deserted stretch of road somewhere near Los Baños. Prosecutors charged Diggs and Kilo Kurt with attempted robbery and Mac Dre with conspiracy. They dubbed Mac Dre with being the ringleader and played some of the songs in the courtroom to bolster their case. They were bragging about it on a rap CD, Lieutenant Joanne West said to a Vallejo Police Department news conference at the time. It's kind of brazen for them to brag about it as if they were untouchable. Agents claim the trio was responsible for 13 robberies, alleging that proceeds from the crimes netted $1.5 million. In a pattern that would continue after Mac Dre's death, police went on record with statements alleging that the heist paid for Mac Dre's studio time. Friends and fellow musicians disputed allegations that Mac Dre had anything to do with the heist. Still, he refused to implicate anyone else and did the time, and was celebrated for it. Police continued searching for 6 to 8 other men who were responsible for at least 29 pizza restaurant robberies in Vallejo and other cities in Northern California since August of 1991. The assault-style robberies typically occur between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. near closing time. This means that the restaurant is usually almost empty and the cash register is almost full. It was believed that the group works in rotating teams of 2. The robberies usually lasted for about 2 minutes. Coincidentally, the robbers have used specific language and terms during their robberies, such as 187, which is the penal code for murder. All involved are believed to be African American males wearing ski masks. They use several different weapons, including handguns, revolvers, semi-automatic weapons, and Uzi type weapons. They also appear to know the layouts of their targets. Police believe that the men are part of a local gang nicknamed the Romper Room Gang, but no suspects were immediately identified. Diggs and Kilo Kurt were the first 2 arrested on January 3, 1992. Mac Dre's arrest for conspiracy would come later. Several more gang members were later arrested when the case started breaking. After the gang was arrested and they were all in jail, the robbery subsequently stopped. This was compelling evidence for the prosecution, which circumstantially indicated that they had the right suspects. As Mac Dre grew in popularity, he brought his friends, less popular performers like Michael Miami the Most Lot, along for the ride. Long after his death in 2004, they remained loyal and devoted. In August 2009, Brian Nearing, an undercover agent for the Drug Enforcement Administration, called Lot to set up a buy. Surveillance agents in nearby cars watched as Lot arrived in a silver Mercedes-Benz and greeted Nearing. He handed him a plastic-wrapped Kilo Kurt CD and Mac Dre DVD from his Thiz label. On the house. Lot, a yoked-up cat with gold-plated teeth, didn't know much about Nearing. Their relationship consisted of intermittent drug sales in and around gas stations and parking lots near the Crest, where Lot had grown up. After their first meeting, a confidential informant for the DEA introduced them. Nearing appeared to conduct his business with Lot alone. He called him with requests and paying cash, $6,400 for 7 ounces of cocaine base, $4,400 for 600 ecstasy pills. Nearing, on the other hand, knew a lot about Lot. In addition to the shared intelligence from the Vallejo police, who had long known Lot as a member of Mac Dre's crew, Lot continually bragged to Nearing about his connections to Thiz. During a meeting in January 2009, Lot had told Nearing that he needn't be wary of him. He was well known worldwide as Miami the Most, the famous rapper and music executive. He told him about his appearances on the Jamie Foxx show and in a BET documentary about the Romper Room crew. He claimed to have been best friends with Mac Dre, Thiz Entertainment's founder, according to the agent's notes. This is exactly why people get in trouble, because they can't keep their mouths shut and they brag and boast about their connections and who they associate with. In fact, Lot bragged on this particular August day the silver Mercedes-Benz he'd been driving to meet Nearing once belonged to Mac Dre. Lot handed Nearing 189 grams of heroin and Nearing paid him $5,200. Over a nearly 2-year period, he would pay Lot $100,000 more. Lot told friends and acquaintances that he owed his success to Mac Dre and Thiz. He was busy in the music studio and entertained visitors at his upscale Hidden Brook home, but Lott was not the man Nearing described in his notes. In subsequent months, the self-proclaimed mogul would be evicted from his house after he failed to pay nearly a year's worth of rent. He'd find himself without a car. He'd bury his friend and ecstasy supplier, Mariko Whiteman, who was shot dead outside a liquor store at the entrance of the Crest. A man accused of killing Whiteman, a small-time marijuana dealer, would walk away unscathed. And friends and former associates said the status Lott claimed to have as a successful music executive fell away. After the Romper Room arrest in 1992, the prison time could have crushed Mac Dre's up-and-coming career, but he capitalized on the attention. Longtime Bay Area hip-hop producer K-Ree recorded new raps from Mac Dre over the phone from inside prison, releasing another album on cassette while Mac Dre remained behind bars. In addition to the $5.99 recording, the duo also sold $10 t-shirts and $12 caps. They tried to keep me down, keep me in the ditch, but the only thing they doing is making me rich, Mac Dre rapped. Eventually, Mac Dre decided to give himself some distance from the Romper Room gang. In 1999, Mac Dre, Kilo Cut, and a San Rafael-based distributor called City Hall Records formed a new record label, Thiz Entertainment. Mac Dre gained a diverse following, selling thousands of CDs in places like France, South Africa, even rural parts of the United States. One of his largest contributions to the reigning hip-hop vernacular and crossover scene was the same word he gave to his record label, Thiz. Already emerging as a more popular street drug, Mac Dre popularized the word and the experience, transforming the tone of local hip-hop scene from hard and gangster to more wild, fun, and carefree. He really was on ecstasy pills and thizzing, said Reddick, also known as Coolio the Underdog, an original member of the Romper Room crew who had produced and rapped with Mac Dre. Hip-hop journalist Davey D said it was less a paean to the experience of taking ecstasy than part of Mac Dre's character. The rapper was famous for his thiz face, a variant of funk face or gas face. It has that double meaning that the music is so nasty you gotta squint your face, Davey D said. In November 2004, hyphy's rise and the accompanying rise in all things thiz was dealt a shocking setback. Kansas City detective Everett Babcock arrived at the scene of a murder on the morning after Halloween in 2004. A totaled white Dodge Legacy van was found on an embankment below Highway 71. The area was poorly lit, thanks to a series of streetlights along the west edge of the highway. It appeared as if the van had spun sideways, slid around, and went off the road, crashing into a muddy ditch. The driver's side of the van had been found with more than 30 bullet holes, and a man was found shot to death nearby, having been thrown from the vehicle upon impact of the crash. It was an exceptionally violent scene. The victim was lying on his back, with his left leg out straight and his right leg bent at the knee, Detective Babcock wrote in his crime scene report. This was several years before he could appear on America's Most Wanted, American Gangster, and a show on the Investigation Discovery Channel about women who may have killed their husbands. The victim's left arm was slightly across his body, and his right arm was out straight, he wrote. The right side of the victim's neck was up against a small tree. The white van allegedly belonged to Savino Davila, a 27-year-old man who prosecutors say was the head of a drug trafficking organization that brought more than 330 pounds of cocaine into Kansas between 2000 and 2006. The dead body belonged to Andre Hicks, known to the world as Mac Dre, one of the most influential hip-hop artists in history. Despite multiple investigations and a string of alleged retaliation murders that left 3 more people dead, very little is known about the actual circumstances surrounding the death of Mac Dre, Vallejo's hometown hero, the larger-than-life orchestrator of the Thizzle dance, and a key player in the hyphy movement that still influences hip-hop culture to this day. The KCPD have never arrested or charged anybody with the murder, and the high-profile nature of the killing has continued to generate rumors and theories among hip-hop fans and true crime aficionados. This is something I still can't bring myself to understand. Law enforcement always seems to do an amazing job at catching the killers of people like Giovanni Versace, Sharon Tate, and John Lennon. But when it comes to people like Tupac Shakur, the notorious B.I.G., and Mac Dre, they don't have an answer. How is that even possible, especially when technology and police advancement is supposed to get better with time? Is it a lack of interest? Is it a political thing? Or are there reasons why these murders remaining unsolved benefits law enforcement and the government? It's just hard to believe that it's coincidental, especially when people like Tupac Shakur, the notorious B.I.G., and Mac Dre were all anti-law enforcement. The complete story of how, why, and who killed one of the greatest rappers of all time is laid out in more than 1,200 never-before-seen documents requested from KCPD. Detectives spoke with dozens of witnesses and suspects over the years. They spent an untold amount of money and manpower to solve this case, and yet they've never even released a suspect name. The KCPD has declined to comment on the documents. However, in a brief phone interview from January 25, 2021, Detective Babcock said that the media department within KCPD wouldn't approve detectives to speak publicly about the case. He said that they feared the interview would only cause problems for the people involved. I believe everything about the case, Detective Babcock says. I lived that case for I don't know how many years. When asked if it was frustrating being unable to shut the case after all the work he'd done over more than a decade, Detective Babcock said this. I mean, you have the case files. He says, it's not a mystery if you look at the case file. There is a mural of Mac Dre in the Ivy Hill section of Oakland, California, the place where he was born on July 5, 1970. When he was 3, he moved 30 minutes north to Vallejo, a city just over 120,000 famous for having the first United States Navy base on the Pacific coast. From an early age, Mac Dre gravitated towards a section of Vallejo called the Country Club Crest, an out-of-the-way neighborhood long known to outsiders as a hotbed of drug crime and violence. But to some it meant much more. Sleep Dank, a Vallejo rapper and friend of Mac Dre's, was born and raised in the Country Club Crest. He remembers first meeting Mac Dre in 1986. When Mac Dre, came to the Crest for the first time, he just got addicted. His mom didn't want him out there, but he didn't want to go home. Sleep Dank says, Dre got jumped into the Crest. Motherfuckers would try to beat him up because they were jealous of him. He went through a lot. Mac Dre's name pays homage to another one of Vallejo's musical legends, Michael the Mac Robinson, who was only able to release 2 EPs under Strictly Business Records before being shot to death in 1991. Mac Dre's final album, released only 13 days before his murder, was meant to be the spiritual successor of the Mac's first EP from 1988, The Game Is Thick. This monumental EP is the quintessential Bay Area deep cut, a springboard that launched the pimp archetype that artists like Mac Dre, Too Short, Sugar Free, and E40 would later expand on, and in some cases perfect. Sleep Dank looked up to Mac Dre. When Too Short, Mac Dre, Sugar Free, and E40 were dominating the Bay Area radio waves, they started a pimp movement. Everybody who grew up in that area and who rocked with these artists grew up wanting to be a pimp. Iceberg Slim and Ron O'Neal were role models. Some people wanted to sell drugs and do all that, Sleep Dank says. Dre was just straight music. He knew he was onto something, so he stopped doing anything dirty. That's a tip I took from him. Even if it's a controversial statement, outside of the Bay Area, Mac Dre belongs on one of the top 5 greatest MC lists. His 1989 debut EP, Young Black Brother, is foundational to West Coast hip-hop. Its single, Too Hard for the Fucking Radio, recorded while Mac Dre was still a student at Vallejo's Hogan High School, lets the world know of his unwillingness to compromise for mainstream appeal, a promise he kept throughout his career. By 1992, Mac Dre had recorded a number of EPs and began his first independent label, Romper Room Records. At the same time, police were looking for culprits in a string of robberies that targeted Vallejo pizza shops. Police said there had been 29 robberies in under 8 months. The case was highlighted in an episode of Unsolved Mysteries from March 4th, 1992, where police say they believe they belonged to the Romper Room crew. Less than a month later, on March 26, 1992, Mac Dre was arrested for conspiracy to rob a bank. Mac Dre was one of the first rappers unfairly targeted and prosecuted for crimes they never committed. Prosecutors used lyrics from the Young Black Brother EP to help establish guilt in his case. While still incarcerated, Mac Dre re-released Young Black Brother, featuring a number of songs with vocal records through a jail phone. He was released through California's FCI Lompoc in August 1996, and in the early 2000s, he moved to North Sacramento to focus on music. It was an era marked by Mac Dre's prolific post-prison recordings, where he created a dense body of work in such a short period of time that I once referred to him as the West Coast Max B. No matter how long you've been a fan, there appears to be an endless supply of deep cuts and mixtape remixes to keep the Bay Area rap historians satiated for decades to come. In October of 2004, a Kansas City man named Damon Whitmill hoped to capitalize on Mac Dre's popularity by bankrolling and promoting a rap show at what was then the Kansas City National Guard Armory. It was the first and last time Whitmill would ever attempt to throw a concert, and he was able to book 3 of the Bay Area's biggest acts for a show on a Halloween weekend: Yuckmouth, Keek the Sneak, and Mac Dre. According to the police reports, Whitmill, who sometimes went by Big D or Honey Bear, spoke to Detective Babcock on numerous occasions, including the day after the murder. He's a Kansas City native and allegedly a small-time drug dealer, according to witnesses and informants who spoke with Detective Babcock in the months following Mac Dre's death. In early October, he started a production company named Honey Bear Productions and enlisted the help of Kansas City rapper 40 Cal, who introduced the Bay Area artist to Whitmill. In a police report Babcock wrote in November 2004, Whitmill allegedly told the detective that Mac Dre agreed to come to Kansas City and perform 2 live shows for a total of $12,500, with the first $6,000 to be paid immediately as a deposit. Airfare, hotels, and food while Mac Dre and crew were in town also landed on Whitmill, who sent a contract and the first payment early in October. Once the show was booked, Mac Dre reached out to an old friend in Kansas City to see if he wanted to hang out and provide transportation to his crew over the Halloween weekend. That friend was Savino Davila, who says he first met Mac Dre in the late 1990s through palling around with Yuckmouth. Davila is Hispanic with brown eyes and black hair. He wears a pair of glasses in most photos, and his muscular physique reflects the time spent weightlifting during his period of incarceration. His father was murdered when he was just a kid. Born and raised in Kansas City, Davila shared a close relationship with local hip-hop artists and was a regular at shows and studio sessions around town. He's a self-described hip-hop head, and his lifestyle in the early 2000s closely mirrored the crime-fueled stories present in the genre's most popular music. While Mac Dre merely rapped about the lavish life of a major cocaine dealer, Davila actually lived it. Davila is currently serving a 30-year prison sentence in Texas at FCI Seagoville for being at the helm of a drug trafficking conspiracy that brought more than 330 pounds of cocaine into Kansas City between 2000 and 2006. He pled guilty in 2008. We were friends, Davila says, when I spoke to him in January. He always called me if he was coming through KC. He wanted more from me. He wanted me to get into music. Aside from a black Cadillac Escalade, Davila also owned a white van that he used for odd jobs around Kansas City. When Mac Dre reached out in early October, Davila offered to have his cousin and good friend, Harold Piercy, drive Mac Dre's crew around on Halloween weekend. Piercy, who was also a fan of the Bay Area hip-hop scene, was willing to accompany Mac Dre whenever he needed a ride. Mac Dre and 3 friends flew from Sacramento to Kansas City with a quick layover at LAX on October 27, 2004. They were greeted at the airport by Davila, who picked the group up in his Escalade. The show at the Armory took place on a Friday. Both Yuckmouth and Keek the Sneak left Kansas City the next day without being paid the full amount they were promised for performing. They were told they'd get the rest of the money wired to them later in the week. It's unclear if that ever happened. For whatever reason, Mac Dre decided to stay in Kansas City that weekend and agreed to perform at a VIP Halloween party at the former Atlantic Star on 95th and Hillcrest on Sunday night. Whitmill told Detective Babcock that he'd hoped the Halloween party would help make up for the monetary loss from the show at the Armory. DJ Fresh told detectives in the weeks after the murder that Whitmill had called him at the last minute to set up sound and DJ at the Atlantic Star Halloween night. He doesn't recall hearing from Whitmill again. Mac Dre once again showed up late. He stayed for only 30 minutes, according to Whitmill, before abruptly leaving without performing. This is where things began to get dicey. Did Mac Dre see something that made him skittish? Did something make him feel threatened? Mac Dre told Davila he was annoyed because the event wasn't organized and because there were other local rappers performing. Mac Dre then said that he didn't feel safe and was about to leave. Davila said he asked Mac Dre if he needed anything else. He said no, and then they both left. He would later tell Detective Babcock that Whitmill was angry after Mac Dre left without performing. Whitmill called off the limousine service and called Davila to see where Mac Dre was. Detectives were later told that just before the murder, Mac Dre had been waiting to meet up with Whitmill to receive his final payment, but Whitmill never showed. When they finally left, Mac Dre got into the back of the van and instructed Piercy to drive them to his hotel. They had to make a brief stop at the Baymont, a hotel where members of Mac Dre's crew were staying, before heading to the Sheraton. Mac Dre was so tired that he lay down in the back of the van, where Piercy believes that he quickly fell asleep. At around 2:30 a.m., the white van was traveling northbound on Highway 71, just south of 75th Street, when a car pulled up alongside his van, driven by Major Norton, a Thiz rapper known as Doobie, who is also a co-defendant in the current drug ring case, and opened fire. Police, who never solved the crime, found Mac Dre's bullet-torn body alongside the vehicle. Diggs wore a gigantic Mac Dre chain around his neck, upwards of 30 bullets from 2 separate guns, an automatic rifle and a .45 caliber pistol unloaded on the van. The sedan violently rammed the driver's side of the van in between taking shots at it. Piercy swerved off the highway and into the oncoming lanes before crashing into a ditch where Mac Dre's body was thrown from the car. Piercy claimed that he never heard a sound from Mac Dre. Losing consciousness for a brief moment, Piercy claimed to have lost his cell phone in the crash and tried climbing out of the embankment, where he noticed another car aggressively charging towards him. He fearfully ran the other way, eventually ending back up at the Baymont 45 minutes later, where he told the front desk worker to call the police. He then ran upstairs and told Mac Dre's friends what had happened. They left immediately to go find his body. The front desk clerk would later report seeing 4 males and 3 females leave the hotel sometime after 3:30 a.m. Nearly an hour passed before police arrived at the accident. Mac Dre was dead when they got there from a bullet wound in the back of his neck. Detectives eventually counted 30 bullet holes on the driver's side of the van, with copper bullets still lodged in 2 of the holes on the passenger side as well, with most of the windows getting broken in the process. The van was completely totaled. Responding officers found shell casings for 2 separate weapons, multiple 7.62 Wolf shell casings, as well as 2 .45 caliber spent shell casings. People were interviewed at the scene, including a pair of women who came upon the accident before heading to a nearby gas station to call it in. It seems hard to believe that Mac Dre could end up lying dead in a muddy ditch for more than an hour after crashing in such a violent way. More than 30 shots echoed out in the night, and yet nobody heard or called anything in until Piercy made it to the Sheraton. He died alone in Kansas City, thousands of miles away from his home in Sacramento, thousands of miles from the streets of Vallejo in San Francisco, where thousands of people still cling to his every word. It seems such an unceremonious way to go for a larger-than-life personality like Mac Dre. A cosmic wrong that forever threw the world off balance for those who knew him best. Mac Dre was still lying in the mud, covered only with a tarp, when KCPD Detective Everett Babcock arrived at the scene the next morning. He searched the rapper's pockets and found an electronic hotel key for the Sheraton and a membership card for a 24-hour fitness under the name Andre Hicks. The crime scene spanned several hundred feet, and it appeared to Detective Babcock to be a targeted hit. Along with dozens of bullet holes, police also found that the driver's side of the van had been rammed by the other vehicle during the shooting. What happened here had been loud and violent. Detective Babcock went to the Sheridan to search the room belonging to Mac Dre.